Hi everyone, Christopher here with our next installment of the Metropolis of San Francisco Music Ministry video series. Thank you to all that have liked and subscribed our videos. A reminder that we have created this series to help everyone to learn and improve their understanding and execution of our services. So if there are topics you are interested in learning more about or resources we can help you find, we're here to help. This week, we continue with our Eothinon Doxastikon series. You recall that we started the cycle of the 11 Orthros Gospels on the Sunday of All Saints, which is also the first Sunday of Matthew, in the lectionary that contains our appointed readings for the Divine Liturgy. Now we are in the fifth Sunday of the Matthew, and during Orthros, we'll read our fifth Eothinon Doxastikon, which comes from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35, which picks up right at the reading from the previous Sunday. At that time, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him, and he said to them, "What is this conversation which you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And he said, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God, and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since this happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. And they had come back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels, who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, 'O foolish men and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?' And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted them the scriptures and the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He appeared to be going further, but they constrained him, saying, 'Stay with us, for it is toward evening and the day is now far spent.' So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished out of their sight. They said to each other, 'Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?' And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 gathered together and those who were with him, who said, 'The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon.' Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread." This is one of my favorite of our morning gospel readings in terms of how Christ decides to reveal himself to the disciples, allowing them to explain with him the reason why they were sad, while he is right there in our midst. It's interesting how they say, "But we had hoped he would be the one to redeem Israel." They're expecting redemption of a particular manner, but of course we know that Christ indeed redeems Israel. Then he rebukes them, calling them foolish men, and explains the scriptures were fulfilled, and even then they don't get it, do they? It's only with the breaking of the bread that they realize, and this mirrors our understanding of the Eucharist, where we encounter the very presence of Christ. So now let us read through the text of the Eothinon Doxastikon, a translation of Father Seraphim Dedes, before looking at the music. "Oh, how wise are your judgments, O Christ! How was it that Peter you granted to understand your resurrection by the grave clothes alone, whereas to Luke and Cleopas you spoke as you walked with them, and in speaking did not immediately reveal yourself? And for this reason you were upbraided as the only visitor to Jerusalem who was unaware of what had happened in those days. Then you, who arranged everything for the benefit of your creature, interpreted the prophecies concerning you, and when you blessed the bread they recognized you. Even before this, their hearts were burning in recognition of you. Then to the disciples who were gathered together, at once they clearly proclaimed your resurrection, by which have mercy on us." One thing to note is that some will include the last line of the previous gospel reading in this morning's reading, because we can see it as referenced in this hymn. Compared to our previous Doxastika, we get an open exclamatory remark that we haven't really seen before. In essence, a reflection of the text. "Oh, how wise are your judgments, O Christ." There's this sense of, you dealt with Peter one way, And then with Luke and Cleopas, an entirely other way. In essence, illustrating the different ways the disciples dealt with this most extraordinary reality they are faced with. Now, let's look at the music. The Doxastikon is in the plagal first mode, which uses the diatonic scale. It is staccato and based on pa, or approximately a D as the bass note. The piece ranges from low pa to a high vu, and it has cadences on pa, the, which is a G, ke, which is an A, and also a single cadence on high ni, or a high C. It is important to address that there are a number of phthores throughout the piece. Let's recall that phthora means destroyer. In essence, it's what causes a change in the mode. Also, as we pointed out in previous videos, we have several modes in Byzantine music that use the diatonic scale and are based on pa. But it's in the shape of the melody that tells us that this is in plagal first mode. Let's examine some of these. The hymn begins on a high zo flat, or B flat, and that's a unique characteristic to plagal first mode before descending to the bass on pa. The phthores we will encounter throughout the piece will affect the way we treat the note zo, so we have to pay particular attention to them. Our next phrase, how was it, begins with a jump of 7 notes to a high ni, and then we have a cadence on ke. The agem, if you're looking at the Byzantine notation, that we saw on the zo was a reminder that our zo should remain flat until undone by another phthora. So then we come to this phthora on a ke, right here. This tells us that we are no longer to keep the zo continuously flat, but rather treat it according to the behavior of the diatonic scale, which means we're going to ascend the zo as we're rising in the scale and flatten the zo as we're falling in the scale. If you look at the Western notation, it clearly shows it here. And that's exactly what happens in To Understand, which we have the first zo natural and the second one flat. In the phrase, you spoke as you walked with them, the melody progresses the ra, the ke ra vu pa. Here, and then down here. This two-step drop from ke to ga, here in the Western notation, with the eventual cadence on pa, is a stock phrase in plagal first mode, as well as one that comes up in many other hymns. So it might be a good thing to kind of memorize or commit this phrase to your thoughts when focusing on a plagal first hymn. Later, we get some text painting on You Were Upbraided, where we find a hard chromatic phthora in the Byzantine notation, and even says chromatic in our Western notation. And the melody touches on high vu, or a high E, before cadencing on ke. And then we go back into the diatonic scale after. With the phrase, then to the disciples who were gathered together, we see that together has a 16-note spread out across 3 syllables. This is an old sticheratic phrase, and probably the most climactic movement of the piece, where the melody builds from ke to zo to ni, and then finally to pa. And then it finally cadences on ke. And with the line, at once they clearly, we have the Torah here. It's pointed downwards, which means that we're taking the Torah and making this a pa, which also affects our zo by making it a vu, keeping it in the diatonic position throughout the phrase that you can see here. And it cadences on a high ni, which is a transposed ga if you're looking at the Byzantine scale. And finally, we end the hymn on the standard ending on our plagal first hymns. Neither the bass note nor the perfect fifth, as we remember for our earlier exploration of the hymns in plagal first mode. There's really a lot to look at with this hymn, but let's chant through it together and pay attention as we come across the mode changes. You may find it helpful to pause the video and go back to listen to how each phrase is chanted. Are you ready? We'll start with our apihima and then go into glory. Anes, glory to the Father and the Son and to the Holy Spirit. Oh, how wise are your judgments, O Christ! How was it that to Peter you granted to understand your resurrection by the grave clothes alone, whereas to Luke and Cleopas you spoke as you walked with them, and in speaking did not immediately reveal yourself. And for this reason you were upbraided as the only visitor to Jerusalem who was unaware of what had happened there in those days. Then you who arrange everything for the benefit of your creature, interpreted the prophecies concerning you. And when you bless the bread, they recognized you even before this. Their hearts were burning in recognition of you. Then to the disciples who were gathered together. At once they clearly proclaimed your resurrection, by which have mercy on us. All right, that was not an easy piece, but nice job. It's really a masterful hymn that majestically sets the text, and one we look forward to chanting every 3 or so months. Thanks again for joining us. A reminder to like and subscribe. And until next time, have a great day.